This video is on the 3 things you must know after reading The Happiness Advantage by Shawn Achor. So we have a little bit of background on who he is, what the book is, then I'm going to summarize 3 key ideas that are very practical. And they're not just about happiness, which I think is obviously pretty important given this channel, but how to actually be more effective as well in your work and your personal life. So let's get started. So a little bit of background here. Shawn Achor studied at Harvard, and he was really into this field of positive psychology. Now, I think this is interesting to think about. So in the late 90s, Dr. Martin Seligman kind of founded the field of positive psychology, and he said, why is it that psychology basically only studies the bottom half of the equation? I mean, really think about this. You got like average people right here, let's say. Okay, maybe I'll use this pen. Average people. Psychology is all about how do you take people who are down here and like bring them back to normal? Like, oh, I'm depressed, bring you back to normal. Oh, I have anxiety, bring you back to normal. And of course, that work is incredibly important, so important. But he said, how about all these people who are out here that just kind of average that we want to make them like way up here? You know, get average to really happy or really successful or really effective. This idea of like outliers. And so he said, well, what if we studied just as much how to take people from kind of struggling and sick to normal? What if we put just as much effort and study into how to take them from normal to really flourishing? Okay, so that's what the field of positive psychology is all about. And so it's bringing the scientific lens of the social sciences, psychology, of course, to the study of happiness and human flourishing. And this is the type of stuff that Shawn Achor was really into, studied under some wonderful people, and that's what this book is all about. So the first big idea that comes out of the whole field now, it's like a consensus of positive psychology, is that we may have it all wrong. Okay, when we think about our equation, we tend to think of like, I want to be happier, right? I think we all want to be happier or want happiness no matter where we're at, right? We'd always like a little more of it. It's like, okay, if I want to be happier, I'm going to work harder, do more, achieve more, get more successful, and then I'll be happier, right? And there's some truth to that. Most models of happiness find that goal achievement and goal pursuit are important parts of happiness. But there's an interesting consensus that emerges from the field, which is actually that it may be that happiness actually leads to success. And that's a lot of what this book is about, is looking at how happiness, so being happier, leads to emotional states, to tendencies, behaviors that ultimately make you more successful. So the equation's kind of backwards. Okay, it's actually happiness that leads to success. And just to give you an idea, there's a paper that I've shared on my channel before. I'll include a reference to it. That's called The Frequent Benefits of Positive Affect. Does Happiness Lead to Success? It's titled something like that. It's by Diener and Lyubomirsky, the last names. And what they find is they try to figure out, well, what's the relationship? And they looked at all these different things and found that basically people who tend to have more positive emotion and more positive outlook engage in a bunch of behaviors that later lead to being more successful. And this makes some intuitive sense. I mean, really think about it. Like if you're kind of generally, we're not talking like crazy over the top, like the guy from Parks and Rec who's always like, hey everyone, but just generally more positive, you're probably gonna be a little bit more pro-social, right? Like you're gonna stop and be like, I'm in a good mood today. Hey, what's up, buddy? How are you today? Hey, good to see you. Yeah, let's get after this project. So one example is happier people tend to have more of those relationships, or better relationships, I should say. So they invest in those, and that builds their network, for instance, and helps them to be more successful in business. In intimate and friendship type relationships, you see a similar pattern. Happier people tend to have a little bit more energy and focus and creativity, right? So again, because you have that positive emotion, let's say you're more creative and more engaged at work, then ultimately you perform better. And so over years and years, you earn more money and you're more successful. Even a final area that's incredible, they've done studies where they take people into the lab and they expose them to the common cold virus and they see how sick they get. But before that, they study their kind of emotional tendencies. So am I like more negative or more positive? And then they expose them and then they see how sick they get. And people who tend to be more positive have more robust immune responses and better, or I should say fewer symptoms after being exposed to the virus. So you see, like, they're literally healthier. And so then you can imagine, again, translate this out over years, they're missing less work, they're more consistent, they're more dependable, they're feeling better. And so then they're more successful. And so in all these different areas, we have to understand that happiness leads to success. And there's even some really good research in the book that specifically looks at cognitive performance. So one example, they did a study where they took physicians, okay, so like doctors, and they had a board of people examining how well the physician solved a case. And when I say solve a case, it's like they basically make up a medical case. Like, your patient is John Doe, and here are his symptoms, here's his background, figure it out. And one group of physicians, they give them a little like gift or something, a little surprise. So they're like, oh, I'm in a kind of a good mood. And the other is just in like a negative/neutral mood. So the physicians then solve the case, and the people rate how well they solved it. And the physicians who were in a positive mood solved the case in about half the time. So they were like twice as effective in terms of their decision making and cognitive performance and problem solving. And they examined more clarity of thought. They had less kind of cognitive distortions. So that's just one microcosm, okay? There's lots of other research that, again, links positive emotional states to greater creativity, even more expansive visual horizons, which is kind of crazy. Increased sales performance, for instance. Dr. Martin Seligman found that very optimistic, so again, positive outlook, happiness, salespeople outsold their peers over 2 years by about 30%. That was one study. And even a study done in the US military on nearly 1 million Army soldiers found that those who were happier at time one, so more positive outlook, but also more positive emotion, were more likely to win awards for performance and bravery over their careers. So the first P you have to understand, okay, in this book, is it's actually happiness that fuels success. So if you want to be more successful, which I think we all want as well, it pays to invest in your happiness, which then takes us to the next point of then how do you do that? Well, it turns out happiness is trainable, okay? And this gets at the idea of neuroplasticity. So breaking that down, neuro, right? That's like neurology, nervous system, the brain and nervous system. Plastic, as in pliable, and what that means is that our brains change based on how we use them. And he gives the example, he calls it the Tetris effect, which is basically saying you can imagine like someone who, let's say you're an accountant, okay? And think about what an accountant's job is, okay? No hating on accountants here. My best friend's an accounting PhD. But what an accountant's job is basically look at all these documents and find out what's wrong with them, right? Same thing with like lawyers oftentimes. They're looking at case documents and saying, how can I poke holes in this? What is wrong with it? How's it inconsistent? And so they're essentially training their brain to look for problems and look for things that are going wrong. And then so when you take that into personal life, oftentimes these people are a little bit more pessimistic and a little bit more negative. And so he uses this example, again, the Tetris effect, because they've done studies where they make people play Tetris for like an hour a day or 20 minutes a day or something. And these people start to like be, when you're like looking at a brick wall or something, they like start to like think of it as Tetris blocks, right? It kind of gets them in that mode of Tetris all the time. And again, it's speaking to the idea that how we use our brains actually influences the development of our brain. Same thing. They've looked at taxi cab drivers in London and found that areas of their brain associated with spatial recognition and navigation have greater activation and density than compared to the brains of normal people. So the Tetris effect, again, imagine, if you were to just play Tetris for 20 minutes a day, again, maybe that wouldn't be so fun. But you'd start to see the world very often in terms of Tetris and be thinking of, oh, how can I do this? How can I do that? But same thing, apply that. The example I gave about the lawyers and accountants, the example I gave about the taxi cab drivers, the example I gave about Tetris. Now apply that to just what if you were to look for 5 things you're grateful for every morning? Or how can I do some little interaction, act of kindness that's going to make someone smile? Or what if I were to go to my wife or husband or boyfriend or girlfriend or son or daughter or best friend or whoever and just really show them my appreciation? Well, it would be that same effect, right? It's just like if you're working out a muscle, our brains literally change based on how we use them. And so we can train ourselves in terms of, again, kind of that mental filter of I spend my days looking for problems and what's going wrong. Okay, I'm going to train myself on that. I spend my hour a day looking at Tetris blocks. I'm going to train myself on that. Or I spend my day looking for what's going right, how to be more thankful, how to invest in my relationships, and I'm training my brain on that. So that is the Tetris effect, and it essentially says that happiness, or the mental patterns or emotional states and behavioral tendencies that lead to happiness, can be trained. With me? Cool. And that takes us to the third point, which gets at how do you kind of take that mental training and maybe apply it to your behavior? He calls this the Zorro circle, which is really about self-efficacy. And it's saying that if you want to change your behavior, you need to start by, or you want to be happier, more effective, anything, you need to get a small circle around what you can actually control and then expand upon it. So try to make it so easy that you can't fail just starting out, and then build momentum from there. And what you do when you do that is you're building self-efficacy. Okay, self-efficacy is a psychological term that basically is like your ability to follow through on the commitments you make to yourself. So if I say, hey, I'm gonna start running, and I go out and I do 1 mile a day for 5 days, I've just built self-efficacy because I said, hey, I want to do this, and I actually see proof or evidence that I did it, which bolsters my self-confidence, which is essentially self-efficacy, my self-esteem, and then that makes me more likely to do it again, and that becomes like a positive feedback loop. And so he says, so often we make the mistake of, what can I control? What can I not control? And we try to focus on everything. Let's say I want to lose weight. And so I'm just trying to focus on, I need to lose weight. I need to lose weight. I need to go on some huge diet. I need to do all this stuff. And the truth is, somewhat, the actual number on the scale is outside of our control. And there may be a lot of external things that we can't control, right? We can't just close down every McDonald's and every donut shop and every bakery. So you say, how can I make my circle as small as possible? What can I do that's easy, that will make it easier to lose weight? Well, I can control a little bit exercise. So I may not have time to do 2 hours a day, but I could probably do 20 minutes after lunch. Okay, so that's one thing I can do. What else can I do to make this easier and sort of focus on my circle of control? Well, I can't control what's around me at work, but I know that when I'm at home, I can make a rule that I don't keep junk food or alcohol in the house. Okay, so that's it, right? This big thing, I want to lose weight and be healthier. We've just narrowed that Zorro circle, gotten really clear on what we can control, and made it easy so we can start to accumulate momentum. So now imagine some people, they try to go out and run 10 miles or, fast for 3 days. And then what happens? It's that crash dieting, that up and down. They work out for a few days and then they take a week off, or they eat really healthy and then they go to a buffet, right? This is the opposite. So imagine you've narrowed that circle. You're saying, okay, all I'm going to focus on is going for a little 20-minute fast walk or a 20-minute jog after lunch and not keeping any junk food in the house. Pretty easy, right? So when you're at the store, you say, I'm just not allowed to buy any. I'm not going to take it home. Or maybe I even have a little snack while I'm at the store, but I'm not allowed to take it home. And then every day I do my 20 minutes after lunch. Okay, so after 2 weeks of doing that, you will have probably lost a little weight. But it wasn't because you were focusing on the weight, which is out of your control. It's because you focused on what you could control, which were small, easy behaviors, and changing your environment, okay, removing junk food, to make the change easier. So you can apply that same thinking to any area of life where you want to change your results. So to summarize this book, the key takeaways, like I said, if you want to be more successful, that's great, but you should focus on happiness first. And the way to do that is remember the Tetris effect. So engaging in daily practices and rituals and behaviors that train your brain to be more positive. It could be gratitude exercises. It could be meditation. It could be deep relaxation. It could just be doing a little act of kindness for someone, or even reading books on happiness and psychology and whatever. Anything, again, right, that's training that brain. And then finally, you need to change your behavior as well. Zorro circle, right? So focus small, the things you can control. Try to make them very, very easy and build momentum gradually. You have to have a habit before you can scale it. And over time, you'll get the results. So I hope this video was helpful. As always on this channel, you'll find practical insights from the art and science of happiness. Here's a video that YouTube thinks you will like. Thank you for watching. This has been part of the Happiness PhD project with Jackson Kirches, which is an independent learning and research initiative to advance the science of happiness. If you want to learn more, see the links down below. See you next time.